So how to avoid XML file using annotations, right? So without XML file, by using this stereotype annotations, we can create all our MVC classes, controllers, services, repositories, any utility classes, and a configuration class, which is important with the @b. So we learned how to use, where to use. When I use stereotype annotations using component scan, we should scan all that packages. Then automatically IOC will create objects. Objects of all stereotypes, including @bean method. Object creation also @bean we will use on top of a method where we want to create a third party object. That object also will be registered into IOC. Usually all these objects will be registered, whichever you configure in XML file or via component scan. When it creates these objects will be registered into IOC. Same way @bean object also. So when it taken control of object creation, dependency injection manually is not, we can't able to perform manual dependency injection. It is not allowed manual dependency injection when we use stereotypes. So we should ask a container to do the automatic dependency injection that we can do by using @autowire. When we mention autowire, we should ensure whether that object is available with any stereotype or at least @b. Okay, you mentioned autowire. Immediately you should check whether this autowired class is stereotyped with stereotype annotations, or at least this class object is creating under @b. Right? You must ensure whichever autowired object is available with Spring or not. You should verify. If it is available, of course, it will do automatic dependency injection also. Now for the configuration part, while I was explaining configuration, @bean method, I was telling that if it is your class during as a developer, let's say Sailesh is implementing a use case. If he is writing a controller, he will put immediately controller annotation. If it is a service, service annotation, repository, repository annotation. If it is any utility class, he will put component. Now, he wants to integrate with a data source, or he wants to integrate a Kafka, something RabbitMQ or XYZ. He wanted to include, that is third party library, already implemented class in simple words. Maybe by Spring also. A predefined implemented class is there. That class also I want to register into IOC. For predefined classes, Sailesh is going to implement these classes only. For predefined class, nobody have mentioned stereotypes before. Predefined classes will not have any stereotypes. Remember, you only put the stereotypes. So if I want to create that predefined class object also, as that is already created, I can't go and edit and put stereotype annotation. Somebody is implemented it. As it is, I should use. So as I can't mention stereotype, but still I want to auto-wire it. A data source I want to auto-wire. As I was saying, right? When you mention auto-wired, you should create that object. That object should be available in IOC context. And this data source is not mine, implemented by third party. So how I can register that into my IOC? Use @bean method under configuration class. So inside that method you can create whichever third party object you want and return it. Bus, you are done. The third party object or predefined class object you created. Similarly, stereotype classes, how they registered into IOC, similarly data source also will be registered. So once it is registered, it is okay to auto-wire it. You can auto-wire and you can consume. That's where we thought of discussing about connection pooling. Here I wanted to create a third party data source object. But before going to discuss this, we learned more about connection pooling, right? We learned more about connection pooling, the importance of connection pooling, why we need connection pool. Without connection pool also I can do database operations. We understand the problem statement. Just a minute. So we understand the problem with the JDBC. I mean, we don't have any alternate for JDBC, but we should use JDBC in a best way. We should not use direct connections. Instead of that, we should use connection pooling. So what is the importance of JDBC API here? Without JDBC API, Java applications cannot able to talk with databases. We don't have any alternative. Either you are using it directly or indirectly. You need JDBC API. So if I talk about ORM framework like Hibernate, JPA, MyPatties, all that frameworks also internally will use JDBC. Okay, this is a standard API. Okay, either you use it or frameworks internally use it. They must need this JDBC API to connect with databases. Okay, so Java given that API to connect with databases. So what generally we do, we establish a connection on database, then we execute all the SQL statements. Basically, what is the need of that SQL statements? I want to keep information permanently secured into databases. So as end user can't able to interact with these databases directly, we implement a middleware and a front end. From front end, when they transfer data, we keep it into databases. So there are multiple types of databases like SQL, NoSQL. Under SQL, we have again many types, and NoSQL have many types. Okay, generally we are talking about SQL only. So any kind of SQL queries we can execute using this API, DML, DRL, DDL, and procedures, function, triggers, anything. And now, generally, how we will connect while using JDBC? I given a simple example. I want to place order of food order I want to place. Consider Swiggy application using JDBC only here, direct JDBC to fetch connections and to execute SQL queries and to close connections. Pure JDBC API if it is using to open connection and to execute statement and to close connection, it will take lot of time. Every time for every user. Let's say as we understand this application is getting on average 9,000 requests per minute. Maybe sometimes on peak time it may go above a million at peaks. So when you get that many number of huge requests, using plain JDBC API is not recommended, because for every request it will go to database, it will ask database sockets to open. When database socket is open, then it will provide connection to you, and you need to execute statement via that sockets, and you need to close that. So every time opening socket, closing sockets, and executing queries is not a good way when you have huge number of requests. If it is a standalone application, it's okay, like which is using in single machines. But when it is a big application, many number of requests coming from the end users, if you want to handle all of them at a time, plain JDBC is not recommended. So the problem statement we understand, To open connection and to close connection, it will take a lot of time. More connections required. When more connections required, database will refuse them. When you need more and more connections, basically database will have some fixed number of connections. If you go with cloud, maybe automatically it may scale up. But until what limit you scale up and scale down? If I get 1 million requests here, will really cloud support up to 1 million database connections? Scale up is possible and scale down is possible. It may heat up cloud missions also. Really not required to create that many connections. The best way is, even instead of you requesting to increase 1 million connections here, you better keep whatever number of connections you have, 20 connections or 10 connections, keep it in a connection pool and try to execute the same number of users request. Try with that much load and you will see the performance difference. So the solution is, while application startup, get all connections and keep it into connection pool. So if you get all the connections, let's say 20 connections I have, 20 connections I brought here into the connection pool. And as I said, in this use case, 25,000 users requested. 25,000 users requested on peak time. So what it will do, out of 25,000, for first 20 users, it will give connections. To give connection and to close connection, it will not take time here. So the time you need to calculate only for executing connection. And while using connection pool connections to execute the query, it is not taking much time. Though, I mean, while executing these queries also, we will use best practices there. Instead of simple statements, prepared kind of statement to make it very faster. So yesterday we observed that executing statement is not taking more than 1 millisecond, not even 0 0.1. It is taking 0.0001. That means, I think, 1 millisecond. In second, 1000 time. So within a second, more than 1000 users request it can able to process. Simple inserts we tried. So even if you get 25,000 users request also, it will finish in next 25 seconds. So it can take all the orders, it can accept and it can save them. And even it will not give any exceptions to them. Even it will not give any exceptions to them. It will not give any exceptions to them. You can keep them in waiting state. But JDBC can't do that. If connections not available from database, database will throw exception and your code also will throw exception. But in case of connection pool is having a waiting mechanism also. If connections not available, you can set some waiting time. So until that waiting time, user will wait in a queue. Generally this will finish in next 25 seconds. I given 2 minutes of time. It's okay. It will process them. It will process all the requests within that given time. So the performance, if you see the difference, lot of difference. 1000 times of difference you have here. So it is always recommended to go with this connection pool solution. Even in real time, we use connection pools. So there are so many connection pools implementations provided by third parties. Lot of connection pool solutions available. Lot of connection pool solutions available. In Spring Boot, we are using Hikari connection pool. I'll name them. There are so many connection pool implementations available. Okay, basically, how connection pools implemented? JDBC API given by whom? Sun Microsystem only. Okay, Java API only. Java API given this JDBC. JDBC given by Java API only. So they realized the direct connection problem. They realized the direct connection problem. Okay, basically Java given this approach to database vendors. Java told, I am providing connection interface You provide implementations. So all the database partners provided implementations. Oracle given implementation, for MySQL implementation, DB2 provided implementation. Every database provider given implementation to connection interface. Java people not given implementations. Database people only given implementations to this connection interface. So Oracle given Oracle driver class, database team given this implementation. MySQL people given MySQL driver, DB2 having DB2 driver class. So like this, every database partner given implementation classes. They given classes. So they have to implement the classes using connection interface. That's how they implemented and given. You need not to implement them. While using JDBC code, we see that class dot for name of Oracle driver we loaded. So whichever driver classes you are loading in JDBC API, those driver classes are database implementations. Database provider given implementations. And they realized direct loading driver and creating connection is not giving good performance, and they provided data source interface, also. One more interface, data source interface. For this data source interface, third part is given connection pool implementations, not by database vendors. Third part is given connection pool implementations. So connections, to create connections, this is the way. To create direct connections, this is the way. On top of it, third party libraries given data source implementation. Data source is for connection pooling. Connection class is for single connection. The single connection. Data source class is for pool of connections. Pool of connections. So to create pool of connections, again Java API given an interface. For this interface, many implementations given. Tomcat given basic data source class, like this C3 P0 provider, combo pool data source. Many vendors provided implementations. C3P0 provided one implementation. WebLogic given WebLogic data source, WebLogic server, right? Application server. They given WebLogic data source. Like this, you can check. There are so many data sources. Even Spring API also. Spring people also given a data source. The class name is driver manager data source. And nowadays Spring is using Hikari implementation. I don't know who given the Hikari connection or Hikari data source maybe. Like this, so many data source providers given connection pool implementations. Even you can provide if you learn connection pool implementation, how to implement, you can implement it. But always best implementations whoever provides, right? A lot of experts will provide these implementations. So you can use experts given APIs. Experts given API. So Apache will provide always best implementations. If you want to use, you can use basic data source or combo pool. Check out which is the best one for your application and you can use it. Like this, thousands of implementations are available for connection pool. End of the recommended approach for database connection is connection pool approach only. Still, this connection pools internally will use this drivers only. Internally, if you want to connect with Oracle, this one. For MySQL, this one. For DB2, this one. They use internally. While creating this connection pool, we learned we need to provide this driver URL, username, password. Internally, they will establish connection with the database, get multiple connections into connection pool. End of the day, the connection pool need to get connections, right? In which way they will get connection? Using simple JDBC only. So always it is recommended to use connection pool, and these many implementations we have. So in last example we see basic data source, and we executed almost more than 10,000 records on DB. Let's see. We will delete that data, okay? Fresh data we will insert again. History, yeah, Spring Student 2024. Count 5023 records. Just I'll truncate the table, okay? Truncate table, just formatting all the records, okay? Now, hopefully, no data. I don't have any data there. Okay, I created basic data source. If you see, third party implementation, Apache implementation. For that purpose, I loaded Apache DBCP jar file. If you remember, here under reference libraries, Tomcat DBCP. Under Tomcat installation, you can find this jar file. If you download Apache Tomcat, or else directly download Tomcat DBCP, or else if it is a Maven application, keep this Tomcat DBCP dependency along with your OJDBC. So here you can load driver URL, username, password, and how many maximum active connections you want. Maximum waiting time in milliseconds you can set. And when I try to execute for 5000 records, not more than 5 seconds it taken. So within less time, it can able to save the records. Let's say now 10,000 records I'm inserting. Maximum active connections count to increase to 20 and run it. 46 to 1 means 15 seconds almost. 15 seconds taken. It depends on the computer hardware also. If I have high-end hardware, maybe it might execute in very less time also. Almost 10,000 records got inserted. If you check the count, we got 10,000 records. But we know it is not possible in direct JDBC. It is not possible in direct JDBC. And we didn't even see single exception also. We didn't even see single exception also. Let me increase the connections count. Chat GPT. There is some command, I forget that. So there is a command in rkill to set the maximum connections also. I tried long back, resource limit something. So if you want to increase in local for testing purpose, you can try that. Big story it is giving. Alter system set process to, maybe you try it. If this is working good, or else you can explore it. There is a process I remember. Oh, segment processed. Let me put 200 connections here. Truncate the data once again. Table truncated. No records. With the 200 connections, saying 10,000. You see the difference? Now it went up to 9 seconds. Now it went up to 9 seconds. I don't know, is it because of 200 connections, or if I make it 2000 connections, set profile limit to 2000. I'm just playing with it, okay? Let's see. Maximum 2000 connections I given database side also. The same 9 seconds taken. So after some threshold, though you have many connections also, not no much performance difference you are seeing. Okay, I believe no much performance difference. Okay, so it is advisable to use always connection pool. See, though I mentioned 20,000 connections also same performance. So what is the difference then with 20 and 2000 connections? With the 20 connections also it is functioning. So if cloud increases connections from 20 to 20,000, I mean 2000, they might charge that month. That month charges may go from, let's say, earlier they were charging 1 lakh rupees per month. That charges may go up to 10 lakhs to 20 lakhs rupees. They will say that we increased the connections count. That this is the reason that we charged it. You got huge number of requests to the system, so we did auto scaling. Some lengthy bill they will send. So with the 20 connections also we would able to process it. Then what is the point acquiring that many connections? Not really required. Not really required. Okay. So let me put this command here. Luckily we got at first instance. Okay. Yeah. So same way, like basic data source, you can use other data source implementations also. Okay. Similar to these, you can use other data source implementations also. So if you want, let me create one more example. Connection pool implementation inserted to. Here now basic data source is from Apache. As I told you, there are so many third parties, right? Go to build path, configure build path, add external jar files. Here we have Hikari also added, you can see, and combo pool C3P0 data source I wanted to show you. Where is it? C3P0 libraries also, I believe I should have. Xlan, inject MySQL, Hikari. Uh, Let me add all the jars and see whether it is available in the jars or not. I can check. Combo pool, not there. Combo pool data source. Okay, no C3P0. You may download it. Okay, you may download it and add that combo pool data source. Hikari data source we have. Let's see how to create Hikari data source connection. Hikari config I need to create, then Hikari data source. So replace this with the Hikari, Hikari config object, then Hikari data source object. Same JDBC URL, username, password, and maximum pool size. Bus. So actually Spring is using this one. Okay. Spring Boot is using this one, Hikari config. Maybe this is the best one. Otherwise, they might not have chosen it. I didn't read much about it, but I'm seeing right in Spring Boot in real time also. We people are using this Hikari data source as a default data source. They are using it. Maybe this is working fine, right? So driver name also it might allow config dot set driver class name orchid dot jdbc dot orchid. So you can try the same insert with Hikari and maybe you can check that performance differences also. Okay, table truncated. Same 10,000 records I'm trying to insert now. Guys, are you following me? Huh. Java lang dot string. Revenue URL username password system admin. What happened to you? No such method. Format. Maybe this is versioning issue, I believe. JDK 14 log adapter. Let me try to add higher JDBC version. So because that is new generation implementation, right? Something version incompatibility maybe. Okay. Java new version I'm trying to finding out. Java program files. Java 17 I have. Let me add 17. Switch to 17 version. Not 9. JDK 17. Okay. Shifted to 17. Try run it. Oh, why? We added everything correct only. JDK 17 is good. Okay, launch errors. You guys know why? Launch error in Eclipse. With the JDK 17. Hmm. So you can try this, okay? You can try this. It should function. Okay. A similar to Apache. This thing we can see again it in Spring Boot later also. Combo full data source jar file. C3P0 jar. I can download this and use it. C3P0 downloaded. Let's try to use this. Extract this. Let me add that also here. Connection pool implementation 3. Let me decrease the version again. Properties. Okay, but the problem is clear. It is not working with the old JDK. Maybe a new JDK might function. Check out this. Combo pool data source also we can create. Combo pooled data source. New combo pool data source. Same, we can set driver class name. Actually, method names are different. Set driver class. Set URL. Set username. I think it is set user. Set password. Set max. Pool size. Similar, all connection pools looks similar. Okay, we can use that. So now using combo pool data source, we can run it. Check the data. Table truncated. No more data into table. This is started executed. Combo pool data source for 10,000 records. Started about 9:25:44 and finished 57. 13 seconds it takes. Right? 44 to 57. 13 seconds taken for 10,000 inserts. Almost all data sources are showing the similar performance. Apart from that, they might have some different, you know, uh, features or different, capabilities. You read through them, okay, and understand more about it if you want. Otherwise, nothing required to deep dig into them. But if you are interested, learn about each connection pool provider and differences. Okay. So in next session, I'll show you how to configure this with the @bean. Okay, as I said, end-to-end application I'll show you. Okay, one end-to-end application with servlets integration I'll show you. Okay, but for the front-end creation, small servlet and integrate Spring with it, and I'll show you. Clear?